A very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Hello and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
All right, and so we're going to go right ahead and take you through what the daily is, how they reflect what is happening. And we're going to start with Nigerian Tribune this morning. How bandits abducted 333 Katsina schoolboys. That's ascribed to Defense Headquarters now. That's the Tribune, the lead one they've got here today. And then they've got a host of writers. Masari briefs Buhari, confirms abductors have contacted government. Let's get it up for them, guys. And then you see UN calls for immediate release of boys. Abduction, a slap on Buhari, ascribed to JNI. Group seeks 1,000 local hunters to rescue missing students. Thugs disrupt meeting on northern security in Kaduna. 19 kidnapped in Niger. Or is that Niger? Okay, well, clergyman killed. I guess when you turn to page 4, you put it in proper perspective this morning. So, well, this is what you find on the lead story. In fact, you're going to find it almost everywhere because it's been everywhere for a while now. Well, we do have a guest who take us through some of this, don't we?
I have Ego Kankara here with us. He's the Abuja Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspaper. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, apparently you could hear, some of the things that Chamberlain read, especially from the front page of the Nigerian Tribune. How do you react to it?
Well, I'm sure most Nigerians are surprised at this moment, what is happening to us as a people, as a country. And the government, as I just saw even in the front page of the Tribune this morning, the government will definitely be very embarrassed. And Nigeria now appears to be the center point of some kind of international embarrassment. Coming from the Chibok girls, the Dapchi abduction, and now we have the Kankara abduction, and all of this targeted as students. So it is not a good day, it is not a good period for almost every Nigerian, and listening to what the army and the security forces are saying, you are not also encouraged, because for me, I watched General Nencha yesterday, the defense media coordinator, when he was asked if there were security forces at the time of the abduction of the students, and he said yes, that there were 2 policemen. One was shot dead, one was injured, all right, and the one who was injured, I think, managed to escape, and that there were soldiers patrolling the general area of, because of, I think there's a special military operation ongoing in Katsina State, and that those soldiers were alerted, and that it took about 1 hour, 1.5 hours for the soldiers to arrive at the GSS, the Government Science Secondary School, where the students were taken, and that they actually made contact. That was what shocked me as a parent. They made contact with the abductors, those who abducted the students, and that they didn't exchange fire because of fear that some of the students could be killed. So what General Nensha was telling Nigerians yesterday was that right before our troops, soldiers, the students were taken away, because he also said some of them rode the motorcycles, and then at some point they dismounted, and then they moved them into the bushes. So where is our surveillance system? Even if soldiers couldn't exchange fire with them to use kinetic force to rescue the students, why were they not monitored up to a point where these students are kept? And at this point, we should be talking about a clear military operation to take out the students by force.
It's very, very interesting, that because listening to the general yesterday, the question then arises, so is it just the function of the police, of the army? How about the police? I mean, you talked about the police the other time. There was just 2 policemen stationed to guard more than 800, of those students. So the question then arises about the kind of collaboration we're having among the security forces, which the president has also spoken about time and again.
Well, you will see that the police is completely lost, because the police is responsible for internal security. You will find that over time, the police has been lost in all of these arrangements in providing internal security. And that is why you have also found that there have been clarion calls by most Nigerians for state police to de-emphasize the central policing system, such that we can have community policing, local government, state, just decentralize the whole security system, internal policing system. But we appear the government is not listening really. It's a conversation with the deaf.
Well, I guess the government will have to respond to what you have just said. Well, Chamberlain, you have more on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune?
Well, that is the lead one, actually, because, I mean, other than that, you have this small matter. 36 states, FCT recorded 11.7% negative growth in IGR. That's ascribed to FIME. But the question is, do they expect anything else? Having seen the way the economy had been tanking, I mean, recession after recession, you keep hearing all of that. The programs, the plans, the policies the government are putting in place notwithstanding, I guess they've got to measure against the results and see for themselves if they need to look in the mirror. Iho, what do you think?
In terms of revenue generation across not only the FCT, if you look at what is happening across the country, basically, everybody has relapsed into just waiting for the handout from Abuja, coming from basically oil and gas derivatives, where all the 36 states, including the FCT, will just come into Abuja and then they share money. So there is a growing latitude, a growing loss of interest in generating, in developing internal capacity for IGR. So, and that is, it has left the economy actually growling. It has left the economy, sprawling on the floor. So, and that itself has become an anticlimax for all kinds of development, whether it is basic infrastructure development, whether it is employment generation, or even providing internal security for the respective states. Yes, we have the security votes by the governors and all of that, but what has been the capacity to drive internal IGR? In any case, you have seen the federal government actually levying taxes at certain levels, whether it's stamp duty, whether it is PMS, petrol, and then electricity tariff and all of that. Whilst you are doing all of that, what is the capacity of the citizen themselves to even pay taxes, such that that can grow our internal IGR performance? So that is a challenge for me as a journalist, and Nigerians are generally very poor. You are also aware that we are being touted that Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world. So how do you further actually tax people that are already so poor? First and foremost, we must energize the citizens such that they will have the financial capacity to also pay taxes. China, for example, is about 1.4 billion in population, and President Xi Jinping of China talks about taking 700,000 Chinese out of poverty every year. And as we speak, the 1.42 billion Chinese population, over 1 billion people, Chinese are already out of the poverty nose. So what are we doing as a country to move our citizens out of poverty? And all of this has to do with the individual capacity to even also pay taxes and respond to its basic demand, having the purchasing power right in its pocket to do certain things. When you're able to buy, you're also paying some taxes, whether it is consumer tax or some kind of taxes. So these are the various ways government can generate revenue. But I'm sure as we speak this morning, not every Nigerian is excited to pay any tax to the government, even though the FIROS is putting up a lot of energy to encourage people to do that. People are poor. That is just the truth. No food, and you can see the security situation in the country. It's really not encouraging at this moment. That's the truth.
Kimberly?
Well, yeah, that is it with Tribune this morning, actually.
All right, yeah, let's take a look at the front page of the Leadership newspaper. It leads with COVID-19. Nigerian doctors insist on clinical trial for Pfizer vaccine. Decry non-compliance with safety protocols. 26 Army generals test positive. Nurse gets New York's first dose as U.S. begins rollout of vaccine. That story is on the front page. Well, leads you to page 4, where you have the rest of the story. When this whole conversation about COVID-19 started, we had an interview with the Director General of NAFDAC, and when we asked her, look, what can we do to expedite actions to protect Nigerians? One of the things that he said was, look, our low-hanging fruits are herbals, you know. Well, maybe that's just one thing you may want to reference, but how do you see us reacting to this? 200 million people, capacity to store the vaccines and so many other things. What's your take?
Well, I'm sure, yes, while we are confronted with a second wave of COVID-19 attacks, I'm sure really, for any Nigerian listening to us this morning, I'm sure the concern really is not about COVID-19 anymore. Is it COVID-19 that is killing people in Nigeria right now? It is insecurity. So I think more Nigerians are concerned about how government can provide security for them. Yes, whilst we are very concerned about a second wave of COVID-19, if you move around Abuja, this is the nation's capital. How many people are wearing nose masks? I'm also sure even...
And that is part of the reason why the figures have spiked greatly. In fact, I think 2 days ago, we recorded the highest number of cases in a day since it began. And we thought that by now we should have... have it under wraps, so to speak.
Well, so it seems, but are we actually testing in Nigeria? We are not testing. As a journalist, I've never been tested since the outbreak of COVID-19 in March.
But you know there are protocols to that one. But what is
you come down with some symptoms before you're actually tested, or there should be random testing?
But you
have asked this question.
You are an editor. You know the process of that. But you know the front page, the first of the writers is about the non-compliance of many people with safety protocols, and that really is partly the reason why But
who enforces the compliance? It is the police. Because, you see, whilst NSAS is a good thing that we're actually protesting against police brutality, what the police is doing, some of them, the bad eggs among the force, that what they are doing is unacceptable by any standard, any stretch of imagination. We also need the police. Now, if you have laws that cannot be enforced, of what use are those laws? So that is the issue. Now, we are confronted with a second wave of COVID-19. Who is going to enforce compliance? It can't be me and you telling ourselves, except for those of us who are just conscious that there's a need to maintain personal safety, maybe use PPEs when necessary and all of that. It is duty of the police. We saw the first wave, how the police mounted roadblocks.
Should we need enforcement to protect ourselves from fatality?
Yeah, but that is how Nigerians are. You find Nigerians running across the road where there are pedestrian bridges. So Nigerians have this attitude of relying on security agencies to remind them of the need to keep the law. Some of you get to a traffic point, once you look around, there are no policemen, you want to break the law and drive through. I see that a lot every day in Abuja. Even when I stop to wait for traffic, for example, people will be hooting and tell you to move on. Well, what are you waiting for? Even when the red light tells you to wait. So I think that is how we are as a people. But that behavior needs to change.
Absolutely.
People must also grow as a country. We need to encourage ourselves to maintain the law. Switzerland, for example, they don't have a standing army and all of that. We have countries in the world who do not have visible policing, but citizens just follow the law as it is.
Okay.
And so I think it is time Nigerians themselves also know that when laws are made, it's meant for them. We do not need a policeman or a uniformed person to remind us to follow, to obey the law.
All right. That's the leadership this morning, Chamberlain.
All right, so take a look at Vanguard newspaper next. It's almost the same. It is the same theme, in fact, from Tribune. Katsina abduction. 2 students killed by kidnappers. This is an account of the escapee. Masari briefs Buhari, says talks on with kidnappers of Kankara school boys. Abduction confirms service chiefs not in charge, northern elders. It's wake-up call to rejig security apparatus, Middle Belt Group. Top operatives don't want the insecurity to end. This is GNI. Another outrageous tragedy of worsening insecurity, NLC. Thugs disrupt CNG's security summit in Kaduna. So you have pretty much the same narrative as well here from what you've seen with the previous one. And then they've got a slew of other headlines here and there. Criminals escape from Calabar Police Headquarters custody. that you also get to see there. But then Peter B is going at it again. How I cut cost of governance. That's what he's talking about. But I mean, yes, we just saw the previous one where Governor Fayemi was credited to have said 36 states, FCT recorded 11.7% negative growth in Nigeria. How seriously, from what you've seen, do you think we public officers now are taking the question of cutting cost of governance? Do you see them taking it seriously in this time?
It's interesting that we are back to this same issue of cutting the cost of governance. I remember very clearly in 2014 when President Buhari was campaigning to be president, one of the key promises he made was that he was going to cut the cost of governance. But about 5 years on, what have we seen? We have even seen an increase in the creation of MDAs, ministries, departments, and agencies of the federal government. So nothing has happened in terms of cutting governance. What Fayemi is saying, I do not know what effort Governor Fayemi of Ekiti State himself has also put in place to cut cost of governance. What we just see as a people is that our presidential system appears not to be working, because you cannot have a bicameral legislature. You have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives, and you have a very bloated federal executive that is having so many personnel, special advisors, SSAs, and all kinds of individuals. President Buhari also talked about the 9 presidential aircraft, this 7 or 9 now, that he was going to sell some and then plough the money back into the economy to grow the economy. We've not seen anything being done. It is like that across the states, where you have governors, some appointing some ridiculous special advisors, just doing nothing. That is how it is, and that is why we are unable to fund our education, we are unable to fund health, we are unable to resolve the lingering crisis with the Academic Staff Union of Universities, and just name it. We do not also have capacity to take care of even treating people who are down with COVID-19, So we are just, we are sprawling and waiting for external help all the time, whether in terms of security. We are fighting Boko Haram, we have kidnappers, we have bandits, we want America, we want Europe to come to our rescue. Is this not shameful after about 60 years of independence? So for me, really, cutting cost of governance is synonymous with paying lip service to serious issues of public leadership and governance in this country.
Okay, if you move on to Daily Trust, you get to see the similar thing. Katsina school attack. We're negotiating with abductors. Masari tells Buhari, I'll skip the rest of it because we've read it previously. But just above that lead story, Southeast will resist card reader in 2023, Governor Umahi. What do you make of this comment? Because there are different parts to it. Well, yeah, already they're talking about 2023 and what's going on across the country notwithstanding. But how seriously should this comment be from your perspective, Iho?
Well, we have Professor Mahmoud Yakub now. He's back as INEC chairman, and it's not entirely his fault. We're also talking about the Electoral Act, the Electoral Act that is pending before President Buhari for assent. Well, if it has been returned to the National Assembly to be rejigged, to be reviewed, such that certain components that can enhance, that can also grow our electoral democracy, it is time that all of that is done, such that even the card readers themselves that the governor is talking about, the card reader has been a problem. In 2015, in 2019, 2015, the card reader did not recognize the thumbprint of former President Goodluck Jonathan. Even in the last election in 2019, we also saw the deficiencies of the card reader. So if a certain governor is talking about not recognizing the use of the card reader, it is beyond the governor to say so. The governor needs to mobilize his own National Assembly members from his state so that those can lobby other members, and then they can probably fast-track a review of certain components of the Electoral Act, such that whether it is electronic transmission of results, whether it is upgrading the capacity of the card readers such that it can quickly it can add value to the electoral system. These are the issues that we need to look at. Where it is good that the governor is raising it, so it brings the issue back to contemporary discussion, so that people can now look at it as a serious issue. But I must also, you said something about Katsina, the 1 or 2 students killed in Katsina, as reported by this morning.
But before
Governor Masari himself.
Let me just add this so that you might as well just speak to it. But concerning this other one here, one wonders, he's now in APC, there are PDP governors there. So is he speaking for all of them? And what information does he have that everyone else don't? But who knows? But add to your the point you were about to make. Armed thugs disrupt Northern Group's security meeting at Arewa House. They were about to have this meeting, and then this group of thugs just came in and disrupted everything. So this is typology of what we're seeing in different parts of the country. So what does this tell you?
Well, it is sad. I watched the news yesterday, and I followed the development very closely. The coalition of northern groups, recently their voice has become quite strident about insecurity in the region, and I think every Nigerian is very concerned. Whether you are in the south, you are in the east, west, or north, what is happening in the north, it has spread to other parts of the country. And if the CNG has come up to hold a discussion around insecurity in the region, holding a security summit. So who hired those thugs? Who procured the services of those thugs? I know, to come and disrupt the sitting. Don't also forget the NSAS protest itself. We also saw thugs, whether in Lagos, in Abuja, in certain places, coming to attack the peaceful protesters. And then the government turning around later to say that, the protest was hijacked. The protest wasn't hijacked. People were procured to disrupt the protest. And that is what has happened even in Kaduna. So this is a dangerous trend that is occurring. If people are not allowed to sit peacefully to discuss issues affecting them, people, extraneous forces, characters are brought in to attack them violently. We saw the destructions, whether louvers, chairs, and many of them, even cars that were parked in the premises were destroyed. Some of the participants had to
let me ask you this.
What kind of country are we building?
When you say who hired those thugs, you're an editor, long-standing one at that. So you know a lot of backstory in terms of what's happening. So I'm wondering why you're asking that rhetorical question, because I mean, are you not trying to hit the nail on the head here, because you know a thing or two about who deals with thugs when it has to do with this kind of scenario? Don't we all know people who do that?
Well, I am sure Nigerians are not fooled anymore. I do not think anybody will just go into that kind of venue, whether they are thugs. In any case, who are actually thugs? These are Nigerians also. People procure them. It is very clear. Those who are afraid of confronting the issues, of having robust discussions around finding a lasting solution to insecurity in the north, may have been those who are possibly threatened, with what was going on there. So it is such people that can procure the services of.
Let's run through the 2 remaining newspapers very, very quickly. Blueprint newspaper this morning leads with, of course, the Kankara abduction. Others address the nation now. Sultan tells Buhari, of course, we've since talked about that one. Stories on page 6. Let's seek help outside Nigeria, according to Northern elders. We're in touch with abductors, says Basari. Students' abduction, violation of human rights, according to UNICEF. And bandits kill pastor, kidnap 19 in Niger. Well, that and several other stories are there, but we could go on and on, Iho, but we have to thank you very much this morning. Iho Akerega is Bureau Chief of the Guardian newspaper in Abuja. Thank you so much for your time.
It's a pleasure always being here.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Sunrise Daily continues in a moment. Do stay with us.
Government-signed secondary school Kankara, Katsina State is still in the news after kidnappers struck, leaving behind pain and anguish. Academic work has been disrupted, the school premises vacated, while in town there is disquiet just as a high-powered federal government delegation has stormed the home state of President Muhammadu Buhari. They don't look happy. They shouldn't be, judging by the scale of brazenness displayed by the assailants. They have two items on their mind: pay a support visit to the state government and a sneak preview of what's about to unfold as regards their rescue mission.
We felt this kind of thing, which happened 2 days ago, the armed forces and the police and other security agencies must move very fast to ensure the students are rescued. We are doing this on the belief that if these kind of people are allowed to rest for a moment, we are also equally condoning this kind of activities. And the conclusion within most of the security agents is that it's high time we declare this kind of people terrorists. And if we do that, probably people will now sit up, because once you are a terror, you don't have any right of your life.
So, if they don't know all that is in front of them, the governor gives them an idea. 333 of the boys kidnapped are still unaccounted for.
The children so far kidnapped cut across the state because the school is a boarding school. It houses all children from all parts of the state and some even from outside the state. It has a population of 839, and so far we are yet to account for 333 peoples, and we are still counting because more are coming out of the forest, and we are calling through the numbers those parents that have numbers to find out whether their children have gone back home, because we have discovered so many local governments the children have gone back, but based on the record that we have, we are still searching for 333.
As daring as the entire exercise carried out by the bandits appear, it is not a fluke. Some mothers are already speaking out for their loved ones.
My son is one of those kidnapped. We are appealing to the government to consider our plight by rescuing our children. We equally appeal to our Muslim brothers to assist us with prayers to see that our children are rescued safely.
No doubt, this operation to be led by these security chiefs who have been severely criticized lately owing to cases of increased insecurity may just have to inspire hope again. This is perhaps a litmus test. The mission is clear. 333 children are missing and must be rescued.
For more reactions are continuing to trail the Kankara school abduction. Well, this time we've got Professor Wale Soyinka, who describes the incident as a slap across the face of the commander-in-chief, saying he's not in charge of government. So here's a direct quote from him where he says, "If only this latest outrage were a personal contest of slights between insurgency and power, alas, its resonance is felt far beyond. It is merely the latest in the serial stinging slaps across the face of the nation, and it draws blood from every sensing citizen. Over 5 years since Chibok, we've yet to anticipate and to guard against a repeat. We continue to hand over innocent wars cheaply en masse to the agents of darkness. He went on to say, when the president was summoned by the National Assembly to appear before it amid the rising insecurity in the country, he didn't initially consider the summon as below the standard of behavior, but rather responded to the invitation to rub minds urgently over a people's security anxieties as one who still struggled to preserve the tattered remains of his born-again democratic camouflage. Well, that happens to be latest in the latest installment in the series of reactions that this is generating, not just within our borders here, but globally, I might add. So we've got two gentlemen joining us this morning to weigh in on this matter. But right here with me in the studio is Tony Ofoyinton, who is the Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. That's IIPS. Good morning, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And we also have, or we will, hopefully, do we have him now? Major Gabriel Adofioku. Well, he's not a development consultant, but he's a senior special advisor to the National Chairman Nigerian Legion. He's a consultant on organizational reform of the same Nigerian Legion. And then he's the immediate past Secretary General of the Retired Army, Navy, and the Air Force Officers Association of Nigeria. So he will be joining us via Zoom from Jos. So he's been around, knows a thing or two about what is going on. But let me start with you here, Tony. Well, haven't seen all of this. Yes, a lot of outrage out there. But what is it that we're not seeing here?
I think basically if you ask what we are not seeing here, if I have to talk like a security professional, maybe...
That's why you're here.
I also look at it from an investigative point of view. I think it's better that it's good I lay foundation that a little bit skeptical whether we have actually learned anything. This is a third occurrence, similar. The signature are just the same. From Chibok down to Dapchi, now to Kankara, the signatures are the same. And if you ask me, maybe most probably because no head had rolled, nobody had paid any consequential price as a result of all this security fallout leading to the abduction of all these school children. So it's now becoming like a recurring decimal. Some of us look at it as now like a business because there seems to be a lot of compromises. And if you also look at the ways security agencies at that top echelon seems to either defend, either contentious about the numerical numbers of those that were abducted, the modus operandi. You also see that even from Enenche, to the extent that even soldiers were even present, so to say, as at the time these children were abducted. You see that there are a lot of disparities among all that. So if you ask me, I want to ask, sitting down in my office as an investigator, I first of all ask the question, who stands to benefit from the abduction of this school boys or students, as it were? And I look at it from a very broad perspective, look at all variables, some remote, some immediate, and I ask, okay, from antecedents, who are those that most probably would have done that? We heard of the, what do you call it, the Boko Haram being responsible for previous ones, but now we are not too sure. The military have come to say that they are just common criminals, speaking for which some of us are like, seriously.
That's what the abductors are common criminals.
Yes, that's so they are common criminals.
In other words, the ideas of common criminals outweighs our security agency here if they're able to succeed in kidnapping these people.
You know, in short, I like I said, if John Enenche could say that because they were afraid that a shootout may lead to some of the kids dying. From report now, we heard that some of the kids have even died. About 2 of them have died already.
But how does that sound to you when you remember that, look, this country spends trillions in budgets for the army. And is that the kind of narrative we're here to spend trillions? If you run a firm and you spend not even a quarter of that, and people come to tell you that, well, how would you react to that?
You see, the problem is that there's high level of mixture of politics in security. And there's high level of, you see, the corruption is so high. Now you are talking about ransom. Now, do you know that, look, the ransom that was paid on Chibok issues, those that were released, we don't know. The ransom that was paid on Dapchi girls, we don't know. Now that means that the ransom that will be paid now, you and I don't know. Now the implication of that also is this. Sitting that as an investigator, I said that I want to ask, who are those that stand to benefit? I will indict the state governor. I will indict security agencies. I will indict those that are, in government to a large extent.
On what grounds? Ineptitude or they stand to benefit?
Both. Both. Ineptitude and, of course, convince me that you don't stand to benefit. I hope you understand that. Now, I said I'm talking as an investigator now. I look at all variables. What stops me from believing that the IG can benefit from it, the chief of army staff can benefit from it, the governor can benefit from it? If, for example, it's like I said, I'm not talking politics here. I'm not talking politics here. I hope you understand that.
If you're talking about now, who stands to benefit, I mean, you're trying to establish motive. So does that suggest that they might have benefited, certain people might have benefited from previous scenarios, so if they did it before...
If they didn't benefit previously, it wouldn't repeat itself in Dapchi. It will not repeat itself now in Kankara. I hope you understand. Now, apart from that, the fact that there was no consequence, the fact that nobody was, to the best of my own understanding, I was not aware of anybody that was arrested or prosecuted. If you remember the Dapchi issue, we were told that soldiers were withdrawn. And not quite long, these people came. Now the question is this, those soldiers that were withdrawn, to what extent have we been able to establish anything for or against any one of them? Have so far been able to arrest anybody in any way whatsoever? And another thing is, to what extent that the security agencies be able to learn? There's what we call the signature of the offender. In other words, you look at the characteristics of certain crime. Now, if it happened the first time, you use it as a lesson to draw up a security policy. Now, if you look what the Nigerian Legion, they have what is called the Corps of Commissioners. One of the major mandate of the Corps of Commissioners is school protection. And they are very associated, they are associated more or less like the baby of the military. And they are so populated that they are in every nook and cranny of the country. The question is, to what extent has the military been able to use the members of the Corps of Commissioners to do that job? Or it's a simple thing. All you need to do, if you have 2 or 3 people in a particular school, have what you call an armed response team. An armed response team needn't be in each of the schools because of lack of manpower and the like. If you have 10, 20 armed response team in a state, for example, the members that are your Corps of Commissioners or security officers that are on ground can immediately, there is an emergency, all they need to do is make a call. Then the response timing. Yeah. You look at the proximity vis-a-vis the response timing. We're
going to get Major Odofiku to respond in a moment, but before then, Ayo, go ahead, please.
Mr. Feto, the argument that you have just thrown up now about some people benefiting from this is quite interesting, because indeed one would wonder, why would this continue if this were not in any way, something to consider? But the question that I would like to ask you is, to what benefit, to what end would anyone put children of Chibok, of Dapchi, and now of Kankara in the line of fire, pretty much as cannon fodders before combatants? What end do you think they stand to gain by doing that, if indeed what you're saying is to be considered?
He's trying to ask you, what do you think they stand to gain putting children in harm's way for this purpose?
Well, the issue of what a criminal stands to gain, there are multiples. One, that could be perpetrated, for example, to put the government in black light before the public, for example. It could also be done for monetary gain. it could also be done basically to push a point. You understand? There are various reasons why terrorists would do that. Don't forget that when the hard target is really hard, what the terrorist does is to look for soft targets. So talking about what they stand to gain, one of the things that they are gaining is the attention that you and I is giving them now. Another thing is the fact that the governor is already saying we have breached the president.
Well, in terms of the attention, I mean, if this happens, we can't turn a blind eye. These are children here, people's children. These are citizens. These are human beings. So we can't turn away from it.
Yes, that's why they are interested in those things that they know. Look, when a terrorist wants to gain your attention, a terrorist do not look for private establishments that have not really made any, that you won't even consider as news. They look for areas, people, and things that will make headline. And one of such, you talk about government facilities, critical national infrastructures. You also talk about people, VIPs, executives, and the like. And those are the main things we're looking at here. So if you look at it from that perspective, and of course, like I said, I see this also as a big business venture. That at the end of the day, you know, these are monies that even in 10 years' time, you cannot come and accuse the government that is in power that how did you spend X and Z amount of money. They are not money that are disclosed. They are not also money that are subject to proper scrutiny. If you say that, for example, you have spent 10 billion naira to release 400 or 333 students that were abducted, and 10 years later there's an open book to investigate that type of allegation, for goodness sake, it becomes justifiable.
Well, he has some more questions. Are you?
Well, it's interesting, Chamberlain, thank you. Mr. Feuilleton, if these issues that you are raising are true, assuming without considering that indeed it is so, isn't it something that the authorities should themselves already have caught up with and consequently identified certain possibilities or certain suspects that could have been benefiting from this over the past 20 years or more?
Well, in terms of, it depends on those who are at the helm of affair. And it also depends on whose table this whole thing falls upon. Now, things like this are always syndicated. It is not a crime that is perpetrated by one person or just one singular group. It's a crime that comes right from top down to the base. So it's a crime that at the end of the day, you are looking at the high. To me, and common criminals don't engage in the abduction of massive students like that. Look at it, takes an average of 1 hour. What logistic? You will need vehicles. You will need motorbikes. You need to move them. To move them from Kankara down to the forest, there, it's an average of about 2 hours or 2.5 hours to move them down there.
They walked to some.
Now look at it.
Walked to the place.
Now, do you know what it means to say you walk students? Now, what happened to the response team? If, for example, let us believe that what Major General John said was right, what was there a call for a backup? I hope you understand me now. To be able to say, okay, we saw these people moving students to X and Z place because he said soldiers saw them but couldn't engage. But what did the soldier do next? Time is always of essence in entity called abduction, whether individual or in group. So if now today, what is today?
All right.
Time is of essence. But have we been able to judiciously use the issue of the timing?
You know, you did talk about Nigerian Legion. We have Major Gabriel Adofigo joining us now, immediate past Secretary General of the Retired Army, Navy, Air Force Officers Association of Nigeria. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Chamberlain.
Yeah, this scenario, it's one that when people just, I mean, when we look at it here, several questions, you know, about this kind of matter but the explanation coming through from those in positions of authority just don't make any sense to a lot of people who read it, because they thought there are very basic things that could have been done here, because if you have these caliber of people at the helm of affairs who are supposed to ensure these kind of things don't happen, yet this is all over the globe, as a matter of fact. So, having seen this yourself, what struck you?
Chamberlain and indeed the crew of the channel's television, I want to appreciate you all for the serious approach you have to issues developing in our country, Nigeria. For me, I would have thought since Saturday morning, when the news filtered into the media, Nigeria should have been in a more sober note. If necessary, flags should be flying half-mast, showing that the nation has been touched. My brother, when you talk about over 300 students, children of Nigeria, taken by some unknown gunmen, as we call them, or with the fanciful diplomatic name of bandits, it tells more of the nation. There is a language, once beaten, twice shy. Here we are, 3 times beaten, and it's like we are still dancing the dance in the same tune. It saddens me to know that, in fact, one of my first reactions when I heard of this was to tell a colleague that I feel like writing to the federal government to please stop paying my pensions. Not for any reason, but for the fact that I know the terrain being discussed. I know the environment in the north. I know the environment in the south. There can be nobody more Nigerian than the military family. It happened in Chibok. Massive extraction of our children. It happened in Dapchi. One of them is still being held on a very sad note, and little reference is being made to it. Now it has happened in Kankara. This time, I'm short of words what to say. But the truth of the matter is this. Fundamentally, how are we organized as a nation? It's easy to cast aspersions. It's easy to cast blames, to tell the armed forces you are not doing your job, to tell the police you are not doing your job. How are we set up as a nation?
So let me jump in there and ask you this. I mean, it's understandable for you to be upset about some of these things because, look, there are hundreds, if not thousands of Nigerians, even officers who, if given opportunity, this will never happen under their watch. They exist in this country. But in terms of how we are set up, because, I mean, we have the Air Force here. So if the narrative of the accounts of some of those who saw say they walk them to the bush. So the Air Force is there, the Army is there. So isn't there some sort of coordination? Couldn't they have radio? Don't we have aircraft with capacity to at least scramble and get in and get information and work together? What's going on?
Look, I'm particularly concerned about the situation in Katsina State. Did you notice the speed at which the governor was quick in telling the president they are already in touch with the bandits? This is an event that took place Friday, Saturday night. By Monday, they are already in touch with the bandits. If you are in touch, I appreciate the military for telling us they now have located them, and what they are working on is the strategy, the tactics of ensuring minimum collateral damage in the course of, getting back these children. That indeed is what any organization will do. But permit me to say this. You see, it's like we have a casual approach to national issues. The sensitivity as a nation is not yet there. Look at one American was abducted in Niger Republic and brought into Nigeria for hiding. The Americans came in, they collaborated with us and took back and indeed had maximum effect on those who have adopted them. But here we are. We have a situation. We are still dancing around. We are still, in fact, I saw on the social media this morning, 200 have been recovered. Yesterday, a report from the government says only 10 were abducted. Come on, come on. Even if it's only one child, the essence should be there. But coming to the issue, I have this understanding. History is good when you employ it to solve your present and probably consolidate on your future. When the Civil War began in the late 60s, 67 to be precise, because of the content and the nature of that happening, Nigeria applied what you may call the next available resort. Veterans of the Second World War, Congo operations, Tanzanian operations, who had retired from service because of the numerical requirement of the time, were brought in and within a limited time coached into the new happenings and were able to execute that civil war in 30 months. Today, we have a situation where nationwide, the armed forces are, like General Yola mentioned yesterday on your program, the armed forces, whether we accept it or not, they are overstretched. And if they are overstretched, I want to tell you statistically that there are an average of 50 veterans per ward nationwide. There are over 150,000 veterans that are still below the age of 60, and even if they're above the age of 60, with knowledge that can be used. It is on record that this nation, is on record that Nigeria, hello?
Pardon me, let me ask you, I mean...
It is on record that the armed... Yes.
Okay, my apologies. You know, does it come across to you as though we seem to pick and choose what we respond to and how we respond to them? Take, for instance, if there were to be a protest in different parts of the country, we know how the police or maybe the army will even respond to some of those things. But with this one, does it appear to you as though we're responding in equal measure to both scenarios?
You are going back to the fundamental issue I mentioned, our attitude to national concerns. You see, it amazes me the intensity and extent to which we mobilize to address very simplistic issues, and the intensity and extent to which we address what should be seen as a national concern. For example, I don't need to mobilize the whole armed forces to crush IPOP. I don't need to mobilize the whole armed forces. We knew when the Niger Delta issue was on. Permit me to say this. Niger Delta, I mean, even when we were Niger Delta militants issues, we in government knew that they had a genuine cost because we could see it. We didn't have to be told. And that's why when there was an amnesty, it was not a sectional issue. It was an issue to set Nigeria on a firm pedestal. So going back to your question.
Pardon me, but we need to go to break now. But we'll return and let you continue in that light and possibly proffer solutions. Join us again. Welcome back. Major Gabriel Adofiko, pardon me, we had to go to break. So could you go ahead and continue your train of thoughts regarding those fundamental issues, how we respond to issues, and what we should be doing moving forward? Can you hear me? Okay, I think we'll try and reestablish that connection. But Tony, well, having listened to him, he's raised some key issues in terms of how we respond to some of these things. So what's your impression in terms of what we should be doing now? Even though, look, we say this all the time.
Well, I think it's right you said. We said it all. We always say it all the time. Different media, different forum. But I think number one is let the president have a sincere political will to attend to the security challenges of this country. the call for the removal of the service chief, no matter how you think you trust the service chief, some of us believe that diminishing returns have set in.
But does the buck actually stop at the feet of the service chiefs? Because if you remove the service chiefs today, there'll be new service chiefs tomorrow. But there is a commander-in-chief.
That's why I said the first thing is the political will of the president. But no matter, irrespective of his political will, there are lieutenants that will have to execute the order. I agree with you. And also agree to the extent that it is not as if the removal of the service chief is a one-stop solution. But it is just one of many solutions. If you
but he doesn't seem to be on the same page with every other people.
That is the unfortunate part of Mr. President's approach towards governance as it is. You govern the people. You are a president of the people, not a president of selected few, not a president of those that are in government. So if majority of the people, even if you like them, if majority of the people are saying, look, these people have outlived their usefulness, the normal thing to do as a government that listens to the people is there are officers that are equally qualified, excellently qualified. They'll come with new ideas, new innovation, fresh blood. The atmosphere will change. There will be restructuring. The system will be rejiggled. Look, the terrorists as it is now, they now know the most probable thing the service chiefs will do next because they've been doing it for the past 5 years. They are now very predictable to them. And that's why we're saying, look, why don't you remove the service chiefs as it is now, as much as possible? Have a good political will. It is not enough to say that you want to even fund. Funding is one fundamental thing. But another thing is equipping them and all those stuff like that. As good as they are, if the president does not have the good, strong political will to be able to do it, and I'm not saying it. I'm not seeing it in the president as it is now.
Yeah, because many will ask, are they actually as equipped as they ought to be? That's a different matter entirely.
It is a different matter, yes. But the truth is not that the military or the soldiers are not capable. The main problem is on the back of the table of the president. If he gives a sincere, true marching order, devoid of politics, devoid of sentiment, the soldiers are capable of attending to security challenges right across the country. You can see what they have done in other places where you see, like you said, is the approach to security different in different environments in Nigeria. Look at the way IPOB was quickly attended to. Look at when government wanted to attend to NSAS. Look at the way it was quickly dispersed and all those stuff like that. For goodness sake, like the example that was even given, a single soul in America that was not even staying in America, stays in Niger Republic, all resources were deployed. What is the value that the government places on an average life in Nigeria?
Oh, Ayo. He's got a question for you.
So, for it all, one other question comes to mind, you know, in all of this conversation that we're talking about. So, to a large extent, of course, we have mentioned the military, we have talked about soldiers, and we have talked about the service chiefs a good number of times in this, and that's perfectly fine. It's a rational thing to do. However, you know as well as many others that there are at least 9 agencies in Nigeria responsible for security of lives and property in the country. What we are talking about is improving intelligence gathering in the country. It's difficult for me to believe that such a thing as abduction of children in Chibok, in Dapchi, and now in Kankara would happen without security operatives being aware at all. That it's all hush-hush, no one knew anything about it. It's difficult for me to believe that. What you said about IPOB and what you said about, you know, NSAS lends credence to that, in that people were able to anticipate that this was going to happen, and they stalled it. The security forces were able to stall it. How come we are only talking about the military? We are not talking about the police. We're not talking about the NSCDC. We're not talking about the customs. We're not talking about the immigration. We're not talking about those other agencies of government that are supposed to be performing the job of ensuring we do not have incursion from outside or from within.
Well, I think I agree with you that much emphasis is laid on the military and the police. It's laid on the military as it is now because we have a situation that is well overwhelming, above the capacity of the police presently. And unfortunately, the military, which is not supposed to be at the forefront, is now at the forefront. So naturally, you expect that since the military is at the forefront, they most likely will receive the credit and also the hit. But centrally, intelligence is very important. Now, it is difficult. I agree with you that to believe that intelligence wouldn't have gotten to DSS, that something like this is about to happen, or most likely will happen, is difficult. However, intelligence can also get to the appropriate channel. But once it is not used, as at the time it ought to be used, if either administrative bureaucracy or compromises comes in contact with that intelligence, the intelligence will become useless. So at times, it is not necessarily failure of intelligence. It could just be that you could have sleeper cell. There could be sleeper cell in the intelligence agency, in the military. Now, when I talk about sleeper cell, I'm talking about people that are sympathetic to the cause of the terrorist, are sympathetic, or they are members of the group, either directly or indirectly, and they are in vantage position, either because they are state governor, member of National Assembly, House of National Assembly, or State House of Assembly, or because they are in the police, in the army, or in the navy. It does work like that all over the country, all over the world. You understand? So when intelligence,
just one moment,
for example,
on that same thing,
comes on the table of such, those type of people, what happens is naturally those intelligence are killed. So it behoves on the security agencies to do an internal audit to see if they have moles among themselves and all those stuff like that.
If you can hear me, Mr. Foyetom.
Yes, please.
I get what you're saying, and a number of people might also see it that way, but just as you said, intelligence goes out, and some people get the information. What is supposed to be the process? Let's say, for instance, that the DSS, just as you said, gets this information. What is the process of using that information? Who is supposed to take the lead? I'd like you to answer that, because I have a number of other questions, one or two other things to ask you about the same thing. But who is supposed to take the lead in using the information that the DSS generates?
Now, it depends on the crime. It depends on the crime. If it has to do with things like internal crimes, for example, the police is supposed to be at the forefront of anything that has to do with internal crime and criminality. Now, if it has to do with international boundaries and the like, then you talk of the military coming in, where especially if it has to do with warfare and all those stuff like that. If it has to do with the sovereign, national sovereignty of the country, yes, the military comes in. Now, if it has to do with things like drugs and narcotics and the like, NDA will come. If it has to do with our boundary, the border lines and all those stuff, customs come in. If it has to do with maybe intelligence on the importation of arms and ammunition and all those stuff like that, bringing of contrabands and the like, at that point in time, the intelligence goes to the custom. Then the custom takes over at that point in time. If it has to do, for example, with illegal immigrants coming en masse, maybe from Niger, from Chad, from Cameroon, from the bordering country, then the immigration services will take over. However, it is DSS that has the central responsibility of processing intelligence generally. All these agencies, they also have their intelligence units. Don't forget that. But when it comes to central intelligence, the main responsibility of intelligence is domiciled with the DSS. So when they get that intelligence, all they need to do is send it to the appropriate security agency that is legitimately and legally saddled with that primary responsibility.
Let me ask Major Gabriel Adofiko on this one. If you look at the structure, the security architecture in this country, a lot of the leadership positions are occupied by those who know the terrain, people from the north. And those who are also in the field, they know the terrain very well. So one wonders, how is it that these kind of things are still going on? Major Gabriel, that's for you, if you can hear me.
If I got you, Chamberlain, I guess you asked with the kind of the personnel we have in charge of security architecture of the country, and the majority of them coming from the northern part of the country, and this kind of things happening in such extent and intensity in the north. isn't it?
I'm talking, yes, and I'm talking about the fact that they know. We expect that these kind of things should never even happen.
Yes. In fact, you are helping to exhume the mystics around the happening. I call it mystics in quotes. Now, I give you a typical illustration that might upset you this morning. If you listen to General John Enenche, when he was talking on this issue, he mentioned that during the case in Dapchi or in Chibok, negotiations were on with the abductors, and his level was not, then he was a brigadier general, his level was not in touch with that negotiation. That gives you a hint. Secondly, going back to what my brother sitting there, the Director General NIS, was saying, you see, there is a structured security architecture in the country. You have the closest to the people, and I repeat, the closest to the people is the DSS, but they are covered in their operations. They are sniffers. Then you have the police. The police is the civil face that interfaces. It is their duty to pass on the necessary information. Then you have bringing in, of course, we have a new one you call the civil defense. Nobody's even mentioning about anything about them. You arm them. In the NSAS exercise, they were not there. They were not visible. Then, of course, you have, of course, the military. The military is the last bus stop. In the circumstance we have in Nigeria now, there is no way you can take out the military from it as a front player. And this is because the nature of the enemy we are dealing with, the equipment of the enemy we are dealing with, and the style of the enemy we are dealing with is beyond what any local police arrangement would handle. If you see any of those equipment captured from these enemies, tell me, which policeman is going to stand in the face of a GPMG that fires 3 rounds per second from its barrel? And you want to carry out a civil operation against him? As for that, I am settled about it. We need a precise combined security handling of the issue. But my concern is this. The spread of this thing is so wide. It's happening in the northeast. It's happening in the northwest. It's happening in the north central. It's happening in the south, and everywhere. The military cannot take all this at a time. So what do we do? Like I took us back to 1967. When these people were invited and brought in, they were given, 1, time economy was achieved. 2, cost of training was achieved. And they were put into the battle, and Nigeria crushed this rebellion in 30 months. I know that rebellion had a geographical definition, but we can see that what we thought did not have a geographical definition is now beginning to have a geographical definition in the insurgency. The insurgency is becoming now what is happening in the north. It used to be what is happening in Borno, what's happening in Yobe, what's happening in Adamawa. Now it is becoming what is happening in the north. So we need a concerted effort. If you ask my opinion, I will tell you that, look, let us run away from one danger. If you remove the service chiefs today, and one of them in his retirement tells you that this was the true situation we were in, we had all the information we needed. We had all the strategies we needed to quench whatever uprisings, but we did not have the command. What would you say to him?
In other words, does that suggest that the National Assembly may be focusing on the wrong things here in terms of calling for the removal of the service chiefs?
Absolutely correct, sir. Absolutely correct. And I will tell you why. The National Assembly knows that the military commanders were not elected. The National Assembly knows that by the constitution of this country, they were not presented for approval by the National Assembly. The National Assembly knows that the helmsman in the responsibility of managing the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is the president. Why do they shy away from telling the president exactly what the president should do? 5 soldiers killed. For me, screwing it down to the armed forces, 5 soldiers killed in an operation is enough for me to say, if I am the chief of army staff or chief of any of the services, it's enough for me to say I throw in my towel. Somebody else could do it. But when you have the number, it's beyond just a military concoction. The National Assembly should direct its fireworks at the president. Tell the president, you and your team of executives, please, if this job has become too much, it's honorable to step aside. And if you find it difficult to step aside, can you come up with a new game plan that will put us at, at the secured platform we want? That is the language they should be speaking, not reducing it to personalities.
Right. Well, Major Gabriel Adofiku, we do appreciate your thoughts this morning. He's the immediate past Secretary General of the Retired Army, Navy, and Air Force Officers Association of Nigeria. And then we've also had the pleasure of Tony Ofoyeton, who is the Director General, International Institute of Professional Security. Thank you for coming on this morning.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, and so the show continues in a moment. Don't go away.
As the countdown begins to mark the end of the weekly briefings by the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Nigerians may have to begin counting down the days until the possibility of a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic.
We may well be at the verge of that second wave of this pandemic. In the past 24 hours, we have had 474 confirmed cases and 2 fatalities, with an indication that this week's figures will be higher than last week's.
In a summary, the PTF chairman, Boss Mustafa, notes that there was an uptick in 23 states. 12 states, including Sokoto, Osun, Edo, Nasarawa, Kwara, Delta, among others, had a 100% increase. By implication, Kaduna, Lagos, and the FCT have recorded alarming levels of case count.
States that have not reported a case in at least 1 week are Abia, Adamawa, Ebonyi, Cross River, Ondo, Niger, and Yobe. One assurance we wish to give is that any vaccine that will be approved for Nigeria will be endorsed by the World Health Organization and must be certified safe for Nigerians to use by our research and scientific bodies.
The PTF is also looking to advance a compelling case for the procurement of COVID-19 vaccines within the budget as it plans to roll out 20 million doses in 2021.
It's good to set aside, to speak with the National Assembly to set aside a certain amount. Not that we know exactly what it's going to cost, but to have something to start with when the need comes. I want to start with at least 20 million doses, which we are expecting from the COVAX facility to cover the mostly those who are, beginning with those who are working in the health sector.
As the task force further raised deep concerns over the flouting of COVID-19 protocols by religious organizations, describing their activities as a sabotage, they have promised to significantly scale up enforcement. In 2 weeks, the PTF is looking to submit its final report to the president. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Dr. Alero Roberts joins us this morning to take the conversation forward. She is consultant, public health physician, and senior lecturer, College of Medicine at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Doctor. Well, definitely, so many people are concerned about this possibility of a second wave with so many cases coming up, you know, from time to time. We've undulated from between 300 to 300 plus to 500 plus to 600 plus to 700 plus as over the past 24 hours. Just as you heard, the minister said about more than 400 plus cases have been recorded. The first question that one would want to ask is, we thought we had this, you know, under wraps. What are the factors that are responsible for this new spike?
I'm sorry. Thank you so much for having me.
We can't quite.
Yes, I think I've got it now. The truth of the matter is we never really had it under wraps. We had a lot of grace and mercy and favor from on high, but we never really had it under wraps in the sense that we knew that if there was an overwhelming number of cases, we still would not have the facilities to cope. The problem that we did have, and which the PTF had realized and everybody knew, was that the twindemic of the impact on the economy was far more serious than the awareness that the population had about the severity of COVID-19 disease in and of itself. So that we're having a second wave is not unexpected, because once there'd been an opening of the economy in the sense that there was, this was going to happen. Once people stopped paying attention to the very simple public health interventions that are extremely effective, this was going to be the outcome.
So this is where we are now, Doctor, and with these rising cases and the low compliance to the safety protocols and major events happening all over the place, what do we do now?
It's very simple. It's really very simple. We all have to take collective responsibility for our behavior. We cannot afford to go into crowded indoor spaces without wearing masks. We can't afford, I mean, there are times where you must attend a particular event and, you know, a favorite cousin is getting married, sister, brother. We can afford to do this in much smaller numbers. We can afford to do this by not exposing ourselves extensively for hours on end in a closed and indoor environment where we're not wearing masks. If at all we don't have to be there, please don't go. You go out in public, wear a mask. It's a very simple thing. I mean, everywhere I go nowadays, everybody knows as I walk in there, my mask will remain on. It is not comfortable, but I've just learned to endure. Because in doing so, I'm not only keeping myself alive, I'm keeping others alive. Hand washing. I'm so glad that there are so many hand washing stations. But I think what really makes me laugh is when you come into an establishment that says no mask, no entry. And as soon as you cross the doorway, you can remove your mask. Even the security people who are supposed to be there maintaining the mask culture have the mask under their chin or exposing their nose. And this is a problem.
Well, Dr. Roberts, there are so many issues to look at in this matter. You've talked about the twindemic. That's a first for me, and that's definitely something a number of people would also take away from this program. But before we go, we just take a message, and when we return, we'll look at some other solutions that people need to take responsibility themselves, the vaccine and the things that we can do within our nation to stem the tide and keep ourselves safe. Please join us again. Well, Dr. Alera Roberts is still with us this morning. Well, Doctor, so many things to consider here. You've talked about the economic angle of the epidemic, but then there is the governance, for which, of course, the government couldn't stop working. That is why, unfortunately, or rather incidentally, the Lagos State governor is taking treatments for the virus now. The Kaduna State governor, we hear, is in isolation after a possible exposure, beg your pardon. The SGF in Lagos and the governor's wife, they're also in self-isolation for fear of possible exposure and things like that. So the balance here, that is the challenge. How would you propose, as a medical doctor, that we achieve this balance? Keeping governance going and at the same time maintaining all the things that we need to maintain.
We had done it in the lockdown months, in the earlier part of the year between April and July. Working from home became the new norm. And, you know, at that level of governance, they have the facilities to be able to achieve that very, very easily and quickly. I know it got boring and everybody got very tired and, you know, we yearned for the in-person contact again. But we came out of it probably too soon. These are the consequences that we're seeing. And now we're hearing about the governor of Lagos State and the governor of Kaduna State, two people I admire very greatly, I must add. But the issue is that those are the ones we're hearing about. What about the masses that we're not hearing about, who are also getting very ill and can't afford the level of healthcare that the people in government can afford? And this is the reason why we keep talking to the community, we keep talking to the grassroots, and we want to be able to mobilize all the grassroots healthcare workers, the health educators, the health promoters who know the community members and encourage them to keep up with the non-pharmaceutical interventions, to keep up with the public health interventions. It is not, this is not a sprint, it's a really long marathon. And the problem is that people are getting sick and don't have the resources anymore to access healthcare. So we have to continue to use what has worked for us excellently, and these are the public health interventions.
Service interventions were a concern to the chairman of PTF COVID-19 as well, when he said he didn't even know that we had such a deficit in public health infrastructure, especially at the primary healthcare level. And then a number of the talk, the number of people might be raising is, shouldn't we have scaled up capacity, knowing that, the kind of challenge that we would have and the kind of population that we have, given also what you've referenced, which is the poverty level. Now, if we look at our infrastructure at the primary healthcare level, do you think we even have what it takes even now to contend with the issues?
We certainly do not have what it takes now. But we have a major opportunity that we can leverage on. And I think the national coordinator of the PTF had mentioned this, Dr. Sani Aliu had mentioned this. We had amazing coordination with the private sector and the PTF for the emergency COVID response. This is an opportunity we can leverage on again to make sure that we get private sector involvement in renovating and restoring and revitalizing the primary healthcare sector. It's an amazing opportunity and one that we should take. There's no doubt that we need the community healthcare workers. There are so many cadres of them that we can leverage on, because the important thing is to get the awareness and the education of what to do down to that level. If we can get the community to keep up with the non-pharmaceutical interventions, the mask, and get them to understand why it needs to be done, and get them to understand the science behind what we are doing, there's a lot that we can gain from that. And then revitalizing our primary healthcare structures is not that difficult once we have political will to leverage on the public-private partnership, a policy that has been put in place since 2005 and 2006. And this is something that I think that we really have an opportunity to maximize and leverage on and really get the primary healthcare sector up to speed.
Well, from what many people may have observed, and perhaps you as well, the challenge is usually not with us starting a great idea. The challenge is being able to maintain them. How did the primary healthcare sector, infrastructure degenerate over the years for so long, and weren't paying adequate attention. Given that this is where we are now, and we indeed take that opportunity and revamp the primary healthcare sector and, improve the infrastructure, what do we need to do to ensure that we do not have the same level of degradation? Because just as you know, and as you have emphasized or highlighted, that is where we have a significant number of people in the population.
So can I draw a parallel to the telecommunications industry? Remember, there was a time when NITEL was the only one in charge and you had to get a pair to get a telephone line. Then GSM came on board at a very expensive rate. Now what do you have? You've got GSM all over the country in the hands of everybody. Yes, it's being used largely for good. And yes, there are some criminal elements involved. But the point of the matter is that if you get something down to the grassroots, it has an opportunity to grow organically. We can do the same thing. Right now, we've got tertiary healthcare at a very expensive level, and that's the only one that federal government really invests in. State governments are expected to do the secondary health level, and then local governments, the weakest arm of government, is expected to do primary health care. How does that work? But if local government chairmen really want to help their people, they've got the opportunity to partner directly with private sector organizations to do that. I know a couple of states where this is happening or is about to happen, and we're very excited at the prospects of it. I can't mention names, of course, but it's going to happen. And then when people begin to see that organic growth, when people begin to see the immediate opportunities of taking collective responsibility for their own health, then that can change things a lot.
Well, that's a good one, there, Doctor. But, at this moment, we still have a situation on our hands where we have to ensure that the larger number of the people are not at risk and do not run contrary. A number of people have also talked about, look, these COVID-19 protocols, safety protocols that have been proposed, people are not abiding by it. And you have also cited an example where just as you cross the threshold of any major building or any building at all, it's right there. People just remove the mask and continue like nothing has happened or, anything like that. So are you in any way thinking that there should be an enforcement mechanism of the COVID-19 protocols? How should we go about that?
It's a very difficult thing to say because I really don't like the use of the word enforcement, although I know that sanctions need to be applied when people do the wrong thing. But I think, here it has to be continuing to encourage people to take responsibility for their own well-being. Once people begin to, and a lot of it stems from understanding the science, understanding and educating people as to why this is such a good idea. Every time I sit down and I have the opportunity to explain that if we can reduce the transmission of this virus to zero, we will actually kill the virus in our community. And it's only a period of time. If we can only all accept to do the right thing for 100 days, 90 to 100 days, we can actually break the transmission of the virus. And that is of much greater use to us than anything else that is being proposed. Because we don't have the finances really to do anything more.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My apologies. Do you think we have enough word out there, enough education, enough communication, not just information, not just throwing out information to people? Do you think we have significant communication, significant understanding of what we are dealing with out there for people? Do you think we have enough information or communication to the people?
Clearly not. Clearly not. A community education and community engagement is not just one man wearing an N95 mask standing in front of a bank of microphones in the Federal Capital Territory dishing out directives. You have to be able to sit down with community residents and get them understand where they are and use their level of understanding to build a basis, a structure of information and education that they can relate to. It takes time. This was one of the things that the COVID emergency response accepted that they had done wrong in the first instance. They had not got enough community engagement, enough community mobilization. This is where we need communicators, such as your good selves, to be able to go down to the grassroots and speak to the people in a language they understand, using rationale that they can relate to get them to understand what it is that is trying to be achieved. Because once that negative narrative goes out, that this is just a government-sponsored initiative to chop money, it's very difficult to disabuse people's minds of that negative connotation. And it takes time and effort and constant communication at their level to be able to disabuse their minds and replant the proper narrative.
If you would recommend, Dr. Roberts, how should we be going about this? I mean, you've told us what to do, communicate with people in a way and manner that they can relate to and they can take ownership of. Who should be taking the lead? As you identified, the PTF, the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, is taking the lead in the interventions and all of that, and the NCDC is performing its role with its partners, all across the states. For the communication part, who should be doing what?
I'm not trying to pick up my own constituency, but every local government area has a medical officer of health. In the medical officer of health team are health educators, health promoters, immunization officers, midwives, nurses, people whom the community know and trust. They need to be mobilized. They need to be incentivized, remunerated, empowered to go out and do this one. They need to be leading this charge, not a top-down approach. It needs to be a bottoms-up approach.
Okay, well, that is taken. Thank you for that. But, going to the propositions that are out there about solutions and stuff like that, the vaccine that are being talked about. But before we get to that one, there's something else that came to my mind, and that's the issue of testing. Well, the protocol that we had, I don't know if there's been any change to it, is that if you notice that you have any symptoms, you make a call to the NCDC office or to a particular dedicated number, and then some people will come to your place to test you and all of that. And that is on the one hand. First of all, do you think that is still continuing? Do you think it is effective enough in picking up the people that could spread the disease? And on the other hand, are the people who themselves feel, maybe I should go for a test, but then they can't do that because, they have to pay some money. So if you can manage to respond to those.
Well, the issue of testing is a very, very complex and emotive issue. And this is the problem that we are seeing. For all intents and purposes, the procedure which you described is still in place. Nobody has removed it or changed it in any way. You have symptoms, you feel ill, you call a number, they'll come and conduct a test for you. I know it's working in Lagos. I can't speak for the whole country. But what happens to the large majority of the population that don't feel any symptoms? Or worse still, they feel symptoms and they then figured out, if I call and they make this test, I can't go to work. I need to feed my family. What am I supposed to do? So they do not call. This is a major problem that we know that we've been facing from the beginning. People do not come out willingly to be tested. And why should they? Because if they are removed from being able to work, if they are stopped from being able to work, how do their children, their families eat? How do they survive? Because when we test people and they test positive, we do not have the wherewithal to support them in other ways while we isolate them or ask them to isolate themselves. So this testing issue is a very difficult one. But the important thing is still this. The issue is that people should not get infected at all. If we can strengthen that which we know we can do, the primary prevention, then we don't have to really worry so much about whether we are testing enough or not testing. We are definitely not testing enough, definitely. But the logistics involved in testing enough are rather beyond what we can cope with right now, both financially, psychologically, and emotionally.
Yeah. Do you think, because, you know, that's also another hypothesis, you know, people could be throwing out there. Do you think that the passive attitude of people to it is because of the low mortality rate of the disease?
Definitely. It is because of the low mortality rate of the disease that we are seeing in country. Remember, we've kept saying it, 50% of our population are age 19 and under. And they simply do not manifest disease. Whether mild, whether moderate, whether severe, they don't manifest disease. I happen to be speaking to a lady who was part of the team monitoring the spread of COVID-19 in boarding schools. She said when they went out to test, the students were positive, but there was not even a hint of disease amongst them. So the decision was taken, let them continue within the school bubble and continue their education. The danger was they had to stop the children going forwards and backwards, transmitting the infection to other more vulnerable people. So within that setting, you find that the young people do get infected, but don't manifest the disease. With that kind of attitude and awareness, suddenly the children are thinking, oh, what's the big deal? COVID, nothing. And this is the problem. Then those who are vulnerable get infected, and then we see what we are seeing. And that is the danger, because the people who are important to this country, whether we like it or not, are the people who are above 19, the older people, the people in the workspace, the people who are holding down positions of influence and power that matter to the economic development of this nation. They are the ones who are now vulnerable, and we have to make sure that we can prevent them from getting infected and getting ill.
And that major thing about the prevention, as far as you're concerned, is to ensure that everyone understands what we are dealing with and takes responsibility. But then there is also the talk about the vaccine and when we're going to get it in Nigeria, how soon before we get it, the protocols, the processes, and all of that. Well, it would seem like you have one or two things to say about that one. But one of the things that a number of people are wondering is, are we hopeful? Is it, for you, is it something to be hopeful about?
There's definitely hope. Let me start with that. We are part of the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. We are strong members of the AU, the WHO. There have been talk about making sure the vaccine is equitably distributed amongst low and middle-income countries as well as high-income countries. But so in that regard, there is a lot of hope. Nobody is going to say, oh, it's only for those who can afford it. However, and this is where I shook my head, it is the logistics of distribution that we don't have. I mean, this is a vaccine that requires, even the most robust of the vaccine still requires a -10 degrees centigrade storage, and is only viable for a few hours after it's removed from that. How do we get the vaccine out of the refrigerated aeroplane to all the distribution points it needs to get to around the country and maintain its effectiveness by storing it at that -10? Then when it gets there, how do they store it? A country that is still battling power issues, grid is breaking down. These are the problems. The security issues means that who is going to go out into the underserved areas to start giving this vaccine? So again, it's going to boil down to the vaccine can get to the airports, and then those who are privileged can also get to the airport and be vaccinated at the airport. Then what happens to the rest of the population? So it is still going to be the logistics management that is going to prove more difficult. We will get the vaccine. Definitely, if we want 20 million, 40 million doses, it will be made available to us by all fair means. After that, what do we do with it? Do we leave it on the tarmac, like happened with the NPI one time in the late 90s, and allow it to grow hot and become ineffective? That's what we need to be concentrating on. We'll get the vaccine. Can we distribute it in a way that it remains effective? Let's answer that question first.
Well, you will have to take the lead in helping us, at least have an understanding of what to do to answer that question. But we need to take a quick break for a few messages. And when we return, you will please answer that question for us. Do stay with us. Well, Dr. Roberts is still with us this morning. Well, before you go into the angle of that final solution that I talked about, there are people in isolation centers, yes. I mean, a good number of people have been, returned to their homes and to their families and all of that, hopefully all taking precautions. But there's also the concern there now that isolation centers have been idle. And as the Minister of Health mentioned, how fast should we be having a restart just in case?
Well, I'm a public health physician, and I can't, deny that. And for me, isolation centers are like a knee-jerk reaction to a situation that should be handled, again, I would say it, and it bears repetition, from the grassroots. Because you put people in isolation centers, that presupposes you have the number of healthcare workers that are required to keep those isolation centers going and all of that. So that's an emergency response to an acute situation. Now we're in for the long haul, and people who are not ill enough to require hospitalization still need to have access to care. And this is the area that I'm saying that vitalizing the primary healthcare sector becomes really important. Even being able to get information from the community about who is ill, where and when and whatnot is part of the primary healthcare responsibilities that we can leverage on to manage this. So we do need to have isolation centers up and running, but that to me is like putting a band-aid on a major, major chronic abscess.
Well, what you just mentioned now also reminds me that we've tested a little over 484,000 since all of this started, compared to South Africa that has tested millions, and that is in the same Africa. So, and you have also talked about, testing, the way, we have gone about it or have not gone about it, but looking forward to the solutions now, just as you said the other time, we need to scale up capacity to be able to store the vaccines when they eventually arrive, so that the hopes that you talked about are not dashed. What should we be doing in preparation?
I cannot answer that question. There are people who specialize in logistics management, and they need to be consulted. I don't think it is difficult, because I look at foreign news and I see there's a major company, whose name, of course, we shan't mention, who has been significantly mobilized even before the vaccine received full approval for use. But we're mobilizing and putting into place storage units in different hubs around the country. That company happens to be in Nigeria as well. They have the expertise in moving sensitive stuff around the world. We need to be talking to them. Like I said, we have a great opportunity to leverage on private sector participation, and we should use it. We shouldn't be shy or proud or think of how we're going to make our own little out of it. We should actually engage public-private partnership policy and get them involved in how to move this stuff around the country.
What would be your word to healthcare workers who themselves are vulnerable right now? I mean, even though it's a second wave, as it is clear in our eyes now, what would you be saying to those healthcare workers themselves?
Please look after yourselves. We're in for the long haul. We are the front line. Look after yourselves. If you don't need to go into a crowded place, do not. When you go out in public, wear a mask. Make sure your sanitizer is in your pocket. Look after yourselves, because in looking after yourselves, you're looking after your family and you're looking after the nation. We are now few and far between, and we're really tired. So I beg you, all my co-workers, my colleagues, from the health educators and promoters up to the MDs and CMDs of hospitals, please look after yourselves.
Wow. But a concern that comes to my mind right now, Dr. Roberts, is how insured, how protected are healthcare workers in the event of contact or vulnerability?
To be honest, we are made to be insured. So everybody has to have their health insurance, and if you're working in a formal work area, invariably you're going to have some insurance. The problem isn't the insurance, the problem is access, the problem is availability, the problem is effectiveness of healthcare. There's no point having an insurance if I can't get to a hospital that has what I need to make me get better. That is going to be the problem. I was trying to admit a patient the other day, and the doctor who would have admitted him was away on leave. So that is the problem.
Well, we have to thank you very much, Dr. Alera Roberts, consultant public health physician and senior lecturer, College of Medicine, University of Lagos, who joined us virtually. Thank you for all that you are doing for us in our nation, and God be with you. Well, we have a few, yes, ma'am. We have a few messages, people who have listened to this program and watched and have their own responses, their contribution to the program. Harry Owunono is the first I'm taking. Says the administrative structures referred to by Dr. Roberts with medical officers of health exist only in Lagos. The local government administration is merely an effigy in most parts of the country. If PHC system must work, LGCs must be radically reformed, funded and supervised. The second message is from Elaine, who says, so we expect security operatives, the military, to go, the media to discuss their operations so we can analyze the civilians. It's a great disservice to them. The truth is the security needs our support. We cannot keep bashing them. It is demoralizing. And Sir Gillo, okay, Chamberlain, you want to attempt the last message? Okay, well, says, concerning security, what is unfolding in Nigeria is what I call insecurity racketeering, involving politicians, security agencies, and criminal elements. How can any group abduct over 300 students without interception? It is impossible. Well, as some have said before about this, I guess we wait to see what happens over time. Well, that's been Sunrise Daily today. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful day. I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm Chamberlain Uso.